Well, welcome everyone to our new edition of VIP Visits. And today we have a very special VIP, and that is author and expert on the Andy Griffith Show and also a Disney enthusiast, Randy Turner. So Randy, welcome and thank you for being here.
I am truly honored to be asked.
Well, it's great to have you. And right off the bat, I want to thank you for giving me these wonderful, for everyone watching, Randy has authored all these wonderful items that we'll be taking a look at about the Andy Griffith Show. First of all, we have the calendar, the 2021 Mayberry Day by Day, which I use, and I love reading all the wonderful, in-depth and really fascinating tidbits that Randy comes up with. Some people might call this trivia. I don't think it's trivial at all. It's very, very in-depth and interesting. And also, we have 60 years of Mayberry, because this is the 60th anniversary of the Andy Griffith Show this year. So it's another great reason to have Randy with us. And we'll just take a look at that. A celebration of the Andy Griffith Show, of course, and we have a number of Andy Griffith experts and people that are involved one way or the other, such as Andy's daughter, his real-life daughter, and George Benzie Jr., and many other people contributing essays. And this is a wonderful, wonderful book that I've been enjoying so much. And we also have Mayberry First. This is a compendium of historical essays on the classic television series written by Randy. Again, just in-depth, fun, interesting, fascinating things about this classic TV show. And Randy, I did want to thank you for the beautiful inscriptions. I was so honored with what you wrote. It's very, very unexpected.
I'm a big Jim fan, and I'm a big fan of your podcast too, but certainly your books and all that too. I do love Disney as well, but I certainly do not know Disney like I know the Andy Griffith Show. But I recommend your podcast to people all the time that like the Andy Griffith Show. So I think you would enjoy this as well. So,
well, I appreciate that so much, and another great reason I'm so glad you're here. And don't you have another book that's just now hot off the press?
It's about to be hot off the press. It's at the printer. It's called the Mayberry Travel Guide. And my idea was, I've traveled down to Mount Airy, which is Andy Griffith's hometown, a number of times. And I've been there. I used to just go for Mayberry Days. For those that don't know, they do a big festival every year. It started out on the 30th anniversary of the show as Mayberry Day, singular. And then it became Mayberry Days. It was always the last full weekend of September. It's grown, so now it's the last full week of September. But most of the main stuff is Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I was not aware of this. They built a beautiful, they call it the Granite City Greenway, that doesn't totally circle Mount Airy, but it's about 6.2 miles. Well, what a great opportunity to walk along the riverbanks he would have explored as a child. And I just love that area, and I love the town. And for a town its size, because of its reliance on tourism, it's got an abundance of just, unique little restaurants and things to see. And the Andy Griffith Museum is there, and you can stay in his childhood home, which they rent out kind of as a bed and breakfast. And there's just so much to be there. So I wrote a travel guide. It is a travel guide about Mount Airy, but it's also full of a lot of the first more than 100 pages are Andy Griffith would very often on the show drop in references as kind of a call out or a wink or a nod back home. So he'd use the names of real people. The most famous example is in an early episode. He suggests to Barney that he take Ellie and Barney take Mr. Rosemary and they go see a movie, and then they go get some coffee at Snappy Lunch. Well, Snappy Lunch is actually a diner in Mount Airy. It's the second oldest restaurant in North Carolina, in fact. And so it spends a lot of time explaining to people, when he said this is where that came from. And I've got I want to say 450 photographs in it, and it's a real neat town, so it's just fun for me to do. It's different than I've done before, but I hope people like it. I like it.
Yeah, I know I will love it. and especially for probably the majority of people that will probably never visit there themselves.
I contemplated subtitling it, like for those who plan to visit and those who don't, because I think it'll be just as interesting. But that was such a mouthful, I just left it the Mayberry Travel Guide. So.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. And it's not every TV show that has such a rich background. A lot of shows are, especially I think from the classic era, are set in some sort of, almost like a never land of the middle of the country, and they never identify. Sometimes you don't even know the name of the city that the people live in.
Well, Mayberry, certainly is kind of a utopian place as well. But on the other hand, part of what I like about the show is it all could really happen. All shows require, a willing suspension of disbelief. So yes, you got to, obviously if Andy Taylor really had a deputy that kept firing his gun in the holster, no, he probably wouldn't keep him on. But yeah, it is different because, there are certainly, for example, there are Star Trek conventions. Well, Paramount's still making Star Trek. They support those things. Mayberry Days is very much just fan driven. I mean, certainly the local arts council hosts it, but it's really fans that keep that going. Actually, a couple of years ago, Clint Howard, he attends. He's going to be there again this year, and he came and brought a video of Ron, and Ron Howard was talking about the fact that he realized that it was fans keeping this alive and how much he appreciated it. And, yeah.
Yeah, no big support from Paramount. They're too busy doing Star Trek.
It was Viacom CBS that currently has it, but yeah, they just they don't mind that it's occurring, obviously. But on the other hand, they're not hosting it. There's no financial support for them, so it's very much a fan-driven festival. And there are other smaller festivals as well, but that's kind of the granddaddy. So yeah.
Is the Andy Griffith Show available on Blu-ray at this point?
Unfortunately, only the first season,
Oh.
And I've got it, and it's not a cheap Blu-ray. It was priced fairly high. I mean, you may have seen on YouTube a lot of people have shared like a home movies of Ron Howard's family that Rance or maybe his wife shot.
Yeah.
That's an extra feature on the Blu-rays.
Ooh, that must look good.
But it does. Oh, it does. It's pristine. And so it's the first season. And I don't know. I'm assuming they don't have plans to release the others on Blu-ray, or they would have.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the first season is available on Blu-ray.
Well, that's great. That's certainly good.
Yeah.
But both, for example, I Love Lucy and the Dick Van Dyke Show, they're available on Blu-ray in their entirety.
Right.
So I'm certainly hoping the Andy Griffith Show follows suit. But of course, there's nothing wrong with the DVDs. On the other hand, it would be nice to see the show get that kind of first class treatment.
I cannot agree with you more. When they released even the DVDs, a couple of the episodes are still edited. They're supposed to be complete episodes, but they're edited. And I think it was because they thought the print wasn't as pristine. But I have certainly a lot of friends that they'll watch it on MeTV or TV Land, and that's if I'm available, it's on. I'm going to watch it too. But back at that time, they would have a commercial break. It would be one commercial. They'd go back to the show. So they were longer episodes. So now to squeeze the commercials in, they'll not only shrink the credits down and show the credits for that episode as the new show starting. They'll almost always cut out usually the epilogue, if they put the epilogue in, they cut something else out.
Yeah.
And if it's very frustrating. It's that was
Yeah, and it wasn't until the DVDs that I saw some of the shows intact, and I was surprised. I was like, "Oh, this story makes more sense now."
When it was shown in syndication, an added wrinkle is they showed it in the order that the episodes were filmed, not the order they were aired.
Oh, wow.
For example, they already knew they were going to spin off Jim Nabors into his own series, going to Pile USMC, and that had already been decided early. So they shot the pilot, I don't remember the exact number, but let's say it was the 8th episode or 9th episode of the season, with the plan that if it got picked up, they would actually air it as the 32nd episode at the end. Watching the syndication, you see Gomer, and he enlists, and then 2 episodes later, he's back in Mayberry. Showed in order. And the other thing is, I remember being very mystified that if you're a fan of the show, you know there's a character, Howard Morris, the great Howard Morris, played a character called Ernest T. Bass. It was kind of a wild mountain man who come out of the hills and was prone to throwing rocks through windows. And he initially was courting a girl named Charlene, which is played by Maggie Peterson. Charlene. And he wanted her for his own true love. But when that happened, I was very confused because Andy said, well, what are you talking about? They're already married. I'm like, well, wait a second. When I saw them the first time they appeared, they weren't married. I mean, they were going to get married, clearly, but they're not married. Well, in fact, in the epilogue, you see Andy as Justice of the Peace. He marries Dud and Charlene. And Bristow asks how much the wedding is, and he says, $2 usually they'll settle for a song. And they did show it, but when you watch it in syndication, you're kind of left to go, I guess they must have got married at some point, but I never saw it. Well, it's because they cut it out.
There you go. There you go.
These are wonderful. It would be awesome if there were Blu-rays for all of them, but I'm happy to at least have the first season. I'm thankful for that at least.
That's right. That's right. That's the way to look at it. And thank you for telling me, by the way, that not all the episodes are intact on the DVDs. I don't think I realized that.
Unfortunately, it's the same on Amazon Prime. If you look at the running time, the one that's the most flagrant, I guess, is in fact when the Darlings first appeared. The Darlings are coming, and they don't cut out a lot. They cut out little snippets of dialogue, and I'm not sure why. In the episode when Andy first sees the Darlings, Charlene's very attracted to him, you know, and when Briscoe tells her to get back in the truck, she's, you know, oh, Paul, can I even look at the pretty man? You know, something Andy, like, you know, you're mighty tantalizing to her, refreshing, because me and the boys would only get men up in the hills or something, and they just don't show that. And there's just little things like that they leave out, but there's one, like an entire song they leave out. It's not for copyright reasons. I don't really know why they did, but they did. So, yeah, I'm not sure why, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, it does happen a lot with the classic shows because sometimes it can be as simple as that's the only print that exists anymore. Right. And like you said, sometimes it's a quality issue. Although I don't think the fans would care so much. We'd rather see the show complete.
Oh, absolutely.
And if it's a little ragged or something, that's fine. Like one scene or something. But we take everything we can get, and we just continue to enjoy it. So there's so many great classic shows. We've mentioned some of them, and I'm sure you enjoy those as well. But why do you think the Andy Griffith Show appeals to you yourself so much?
Andy Griffith always said, when asked about what the show was about, he would always answer, it's about love. And I do think, again, I'm a fan of, I like the Big Bang Theory, you know?
Yeah.
And as a piece of trivia for people watching, if they're not aware of this, the Big Bang Theory, the two main roommates, Sheldon Cooper and Leonard Hofstadter, make homage to Sheldon Leonard, who created the Andy Griffith Show and produced the Dick Van Dyke Show. So, but, you know, I think with a lot of shows now, number one, the laugh track is used so heavily. I mean, I will almost guarantee if it's a regular sitcom now, close your eyes, there will be uproarious laughter liberally, like every 10 seconds, you know. But the Andy Show is not afraid to have an episode where Opie accidentally kills the bird. And, man, that's almost a drama, the way it's set up. There's very little humor in that episode. But I ultimately, I just feel like it's a show about people that actually care about one another, and they look after one another. Barney, you know, certainly, and there are a few characters that are funnier than somebody that is so self-assured of themselves, and they have absolutely no reason to be wrong, you know, most of the time. But Andy will often, in essence, kind of sacrifice so that Barney's ego can stay intact. You know, he'll let Barney take credit for things that really Andy did, and you know, and I just find a lot of, you know, really quite moving. You know, if you let yourself be open to that. It's easy to kind of be hard about it and say, well, it's just a show. But if you really think about what they're saying, it's so well done. And the other thing too is, you know, the writing I think is top notch, and the acting is great, including Ron Howard. I mean, man, from such a young age, I watch that. I'm always just stunned. I mean, I like the Dick Van Dyke Show, and not a knock against that child actor at all. But I always used to joke, well, the kid's in his bedroom a lot.
Yeah.
Ron Howard can hold his own. You know, he really, it's pretty stunning at such a young age he can pull some of that stuff off. I'm sure a lot of that's due to his dad, but it's obviously due to Ron's, abilities. But it makes the show just, to me, endlessly fascinating. There aren't many shows I could watch something, and I guess, this is the 30th time I've seen it, and it still makes me laugh out loud, because of the way something happens. So
right, it's so delicious, really.
It really is. I will say one other thing is the show was shot with one camera. Not that it was the only show done that way, but it was, I Love Lucy was shot like it's a stage play in front of a live audience. And they shot it with one camera. And so you actually did see the outside quite a bit. They shot it at Desilu had they called it the 40-acre backlot, where Blowing with the Wind was filmed, and King Kong, and a lot of Hogan's Heroes later, a lot of different shows. But you saw them outside enough for them to be out by the lake, and it just seems like a real town. You'd see, and they were very good about having cars go by in the background or somebody off in the distance mowing the grass, and it just looks like a real place.
Well, you mentioned Ron Howard. Now from my video about TV Guide.
Yeah, the redheaded. Yeah.
Yeah, I really am a huge fan of his right from the start. First season, he has really a special talent, and certainly Andy and Sheldon Leonard and Danny Thomas all recognize that, obviously, and he had already started to make a name for himself, as I'm sure you know, as young as he was.
Oh, yeah.
He was in the pilot for Barnaby, the based on the comic strip, a kind of a cult classic comic strip for those that don't know, about the guardian angel, or the fairy godfather, actually.
Yes.
And his cigar is his magic wand, and he comes to this little boy. So if that show had been picked up, Ron would have been like almost the main character. So when it wasn't picked up, they snapped him up for the Andy Griffith show, and he's, as a lot of people know, he's in the pilot, which is part of the Danny Thomas show. So he and Andy are the mainstays for the entire run of the series, and I think that says a lot.
Well, some people expressed surprise that Ron Howard got billion above down nods, but honestly, the show at its core is about a widowed father raising his young son. That's what the show is about. Who doesn't love Barney Fife, obviously,
Right.
But and I'll be the first to say, that during the color years, the quality was not as great. I think that's partially Aaron Rubin left to do Dover Pound. He was very much a driving force behind the scenes for that show, but the show remained incredibly popular, as I know you're aware, but it went off the air #1 in the country.
Yeah.
The only other two shows to do that, I Love Lucy and Seinfeld. So even though we watch it now and go, those color episodes were not as strong, I'd still say they're better than a lot of what's on TV, but not as strong.
Right.
But yet, the show didn't drop in popularity. It was, and it's true now, as true as it was then, but it is a form of escapism, but I mean that in the best sense of the word. And when that show was being aired, sure, Vietnam was going on, there were assassinations, there was a fight for civil rights, that was all going on, and but not in Mayberry. It was a way to kind of just. Andy Griffith said it's obviously set in the 60s, but it definitely has a feel of when he was a child. He said he wanted to have a feel of the 30s. So, yes, of course, since Ford was one of their sponsors, they drove a brand new squad car every year.
That helps to state it, doesn't it?
And, he's talking on a candlestick telephone, and they've got a party line, and Sarah the operator, and, so it definitely had a feel of a different time and a simpler time. And, I think nostalgia can be a bad thing if you rely on it too much, but it can also be a healthy thing to a point. And I think that's what the show fulfills, just for half an hour you can get away and see a place that people really care about one another. And I don't. I want to say too. I don't want to make it sound like I'm down on the human race. I've always said what you see on the news is not the majority of what's happening. I mean, yes, there are people that do bad things. Most people are good people. I truly believe that. You know, I realize not everybody is, but most people are. And I think it's just refreshing to have a show that celebrates that. And I think that's what it does.
Right. I agree. And it is, as you've so well put it, it's an uplifting show. It's a positive show. And it is lovely to see something about the people that care about each other, even with all their quirks and their eccentricities. And
well, and you may be aware of this, but when the show started, the plan had been for Andy to be closer to the Will Stockdale character from No Time for Sargent. It's not quite that broad. It's pretty broad in season one. Andy Griffith himself said he couldn't watch the first season. But, you know, for like, there's an episode, it's the second episode called The Manhunt, where the state police come and they've got a map with the magnets, you know, to show where they want to put up roadblocks. And Andy said, well, look at that. They stick right, you know, he's kind of, you know, it's pretty broad. But they realized pretty quickly, I think, when Don Knotts, who was not in the pilot, became part of the show, that he should be the main comic relief. And of course, pretty soon, there's lots of other kind of, zany might be too strong a word, but there's Floyd and eventually Gomer and other characters. And Andy's basically the straight man who's keeping things in line. So
yeah,
it's a different thing.
And he was quite brilliant to realize that, and he was the one that said, "Let's go that way."
Absolutely.
Where he could have easily have said, "No, I want to be the one that gets all the laughs."
Precisely what many, I think, star actors probably would have done. And he was, if he thought a line worked better for somebody else, he'd give it away. And he also made it a big point to say, if it sounds like a joke, throw it out. We don't want it. It's very much a character-driven show. A lot of times with the plot, there's not that much happening in the show necessarily, but it's about the characters. And there are also a lot of scenes that are beloved by Mayberry fans, where, you know, they're sitting on the front porch just talking, and it doesn't really advance the storyline at all for what's happening in the episode, but those are like some of the best scenes.
Yeah, they are. I love your observations, but it's very interesting. The whole issue of the color episodes. It's actually one of my favorite topics, and if I ever have a chance to write an article for your excellent magazine, which we'll get to, I would like to write about the color episodes, because I think they're they're, as I think you were alluding to, they're kind of put down, and a little bit unjustly. They're not as bad as some people make them out to be. Naturally, it's a disappointment. Barney is not part of. He makes guest appearances, which are wonderful. In fact, those are some of the best episodes, obviously. But if you can get past that, the main problem is the writing. And that really makes us see seasons 1 through 5 how brilliant the writing was. Because when you lose that, which unfortunately you do with seasons 6 through 8, you really see it. But we still have we still have the characters.
You do, and I will say too, I will. I don't do this very often because I just don't have time, but occasionally I'll make memes. So I put on I have a Facebook group that you know, I occasionally post stuff on, and inevitably, if I do a color episode, and I eventually drop these memes, you know, like one every other day or whatever, and I go all the way through, inevitably people will say, you know, I'd forgotten how much funny stuff was in that. You know, it's like there is good humor there. It's just some people just don't want to see that. And obviously, too, if you're a fan of only the black and white years, you're really not a fan of the Andy Griffith Show. You're a fan of about, 5/8 of the Andy Griffith shows. Partially for me, I view it as a historian, too. I think it's fascinating to watch. Even if it's a little bit weaker episode, it's still interesting to watch what they're trying to do and keep that going. And, yeah, I'd love to have an article for you, by the way, from you for the magazine.
Well, it would be a great honor. I would love to do that. And I guess since we brought it up, we should talk about your wonderful Andy Griffith Show Ambassador program. And I'm so honored to be a member. I have this beautiful certificate of membership, and For anybody that hasn't seen it, we have this wonderful magazine that you put out. Now, how often does this come out, Randy?
It's a quarterly.
Quarterly, great.
Yeah.
And here's the most recent issue.
Yeah. I will tell you something about this that means a lot to me. So, for example, the issue you just held up, I have a friend that helps Betty Lynn. She now lives in Mount Airy, where Andy Griffith grew up. She's in a retirement community there. And he told me just the other day, I was in her room and I saw your magazine there sitting on her nightstand, So it's like, oh, that really is nice.
Yes. And I'm sure she's enjoyed it too. It's an excellent magazine. Again, for anybody who's listening that hasn't seen it, here's another. I enjoy it and read it cover to cover, and always discover things I didn't know. Lots of info, and it's fun. It's fun and extremely well done. So for anybody who's interested in joining the ambassador program, how would they go about it?
On my website, where the books and calendars are available, and I also have like T-shirts and different things. There's a link that says the Andy Griffith Show Ambassadors Program. You just click that. There's a form you can download. And basically, if you subscribe to the magazine for a year, and it's kind of how I view it, but you get the certificate that you showed. And at the beginning, I think people assumed it was just something I'm printing off at home on my printer. No, I have this professionally printed. It's on 100-pound weight, linen paper, got an embossed gold seal, and
yeah,
that kind of thing.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have framed it.
Oh yeah. People send me pictures all the time that way. It's kind of fun. And then the magazine, I get 4 issues of the magazine, and I encourage people that are fans to submit things. Initially I was just writing everything, but now I often will have somebody, they've written something and I get able to put it in and give them an opportunity to get to share, their thoughts about the show as well, which is great. So
it really is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to it. And we've kind of gone past the age of fanzines. The fanzines used to be a big thing, and now, of course, it's mostly blogs and websites and, I don't know, podcasts and YouTube. So it's wonderful to see something that's more along the lines of a fanzine. But for anybody that's listening and is thinking a fanzine is kind of like a churned out little publication, not at all. This is so professionally done.
I have it professionally printed, and yeah. So yeah, I guess it is kind of a fanzine, but it's not what when I was in college. That's what fanzine was. It was stapled together kind of thing. So yeah. There is something to me about. I think it's because of the Andy Griffith Show and the nature of it. It's fun as I hate to say old school, but yeah, old school enough that you actually get a magazine in the mail. It's not
right.
It's not an email notice. No, it's an actual magazine.
Yeah, that you can.
So when I started this, I did not do it with COVID in mind. I already had planned to start all this, and I had so many people, thanking me because how great it was to have something show up in the mailbox, 3 times a year, and about the show and how, especially during COVID, it was just, I'm happy that it helped people stay connected in that way. But that was not the plan at all. I had planned to do this long before. So.
Well, you're a better planner than you think, I guess.
Well, unfortunately, in this case,
yes, true. But any little ray of sunshine, I guess you could say, to help us get through it. And it's true. It's wonderful to receive it in your mailbox, and then you can enjoy it. You can savor it over the next few days, as I certainly do. I love it. So everybody listening, please check it out at Randy's website, and I encourage everyone to join. The magazine is well worth it. I was going to ask you about Alan's podcast, which is, I guess I would use the word professional. It's a professional Andy Griffith Show podcast. He has been producing it for years now, and it's on. How often is it?
He does it every week.
It's every week, yeah. I wanted to say that, but that almost sounded like that couldn't be.
He does it every week, and I don't remember the number, but he's well into the 600s. I think he said he originally started with the idea he would do 249. There were 249 episodes of the show, but he kept going, and yeah, he's been doing it a long time.
and it's very, very well done. I listen to it, and I do go back because I can't. I've only been listening to it for the last few years, maybe like 5 years. So I will go back into the archives and listen, catch up a little bit because it's very enjoyable.
There's a lot of great stuff in those archives if people take the time to look. Interviews with the cast. It's some really good stuff.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, and a lot of historical stuff. As long as well as his own observations, and he's real fun to listen to. He's real pleasant, and of course, he loves the show. And why don't you tell our audience what he sort of does, his cosplay?
He is they use the term tribute artists. So he is the Floyd tribute artist at Mayberry events. So if you go to Mayberry Days, you'll see Alan walking around wearing a barber coat, basically pretending to be Floyd. And they don't necessarily try to do a spot-on impersonation. It's more the spirit of the character. And there's quite a few people that do that, and they just do it for the love of the show.
Yeah.
It's not as though the Surrey Arts Council pays all of them to please come and do this. They just do it because they're fans of the show.
Right.
And Alan's been doing it a long time. And he does a great job. I've been involved with that podcast since about, the beginning of 2017. So I do a segment most every week called This Week in Mayberry History, right? Talk about a character in the show. Sometimes I kind of do a deep dive that's more in depth. Sometimes it's a one-time thing. But Alan's been doing it so long. I'm amazed you're able to keep up the pace you do as far as that goes. But once a week or something like that. He actually does it live on, you can find us at twochairsnowaiting.com or on any podcatcher, iTunes, whatever. But he does it live on Monday nights, and if you watch on a Monday night, you have to go to live.twochairsnowaiting.com. And for maybe 20 minutes before he starts, he just visits with people. And he goes, okay, here's the podcast. And you see what you would normally see on YouTube later on. And when it's done, he'll spend another 20 or 30 minutes talking and just visiting with people.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Just community.
Yeah, community is the word. And I've heard him make reference to the chat. I've never done that myself. It's hard for me to catch live things. So I almost always hear the recorded version, which is fine, but it sounds like they have a lot of fun.
Even live, I can't listen and then type something too, and I lurk. Watch. I don't usually take part in the chat room. When Don Knotts came in, for people that don't know this story, when they did the pilot, there was no deputy. There was Andy and Opie, and there was you didn't hear that he talked to Sarah on the telephone. It continued over, and Don Knotts had been on Steve Allen's show that had just been canceled. And he played, the nervous man on the street was the main character he did. And he just happened to be at a friend's house, and they were playing bridge. And the friend was going to be on the show, on the Danny Thomas show in the next few weeks. So he wanted to watch it that night. And thank goodness, because when they did, hey, it's Andy Griffith. Well, Don Knotts had been in the Broadway play No Time for Sergeants with Andy. That's how they met, and it appeared in the movie. And he called Andy the next day and said, doesn't the sheriff need a deputy? But Andy suggested that he call Sheldon Leonard. And when Sheldon Leonard met with Don Knotts, they did not put him under contract immediately. They just hired him, for the episode. And I don't think they really necessarily realized what they had at that moment, but they realized it pretty quickly. So not so much longer, he had a 3-year contract that got extended to a 5-year contract. That is why they made the little throwaway joke. They were kind of joking about nepotism in small towns. So he tells Andy he wants people in the town to know he was chosen because he was such a hard worker. I want to thank you, Cousin Andy. A couple more times, Andy saying, I never thought my cousin could do such a good job. I will say in the South, a lot of times people like to retcon, retroactively fix the continuity of these things. And in the South, people will often call somebody their cousin. They're not really their first cousin. My mom will often, introduce them to somebody. Hey, this is your cousin. And if you do the math, that's why fourth cousin twice removed. So, but yeah, they dropped that joke pretty quickly. The idea of them being cousins.
Yeah.
But he definitely was treated as part of the family for sure.
Yeah, and it really makes for a wonderful chemistry and dynamic between all the characters. So, Randy, I'm enjoying our talk so much today that I think I'd like to stop here. And maybe what we can do is meet up again for part 2. Would you be able to come back and talk some more about the Andy Griffith Show?
Would I ever not talk about that? Of course. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, then we will see you again on part 2. And I hope all of you watching will join us for part 2 of our talk with Randy Turner, expert on the Andy Griffith Show. Please join us next time.